You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Damian here with my co-host, Matt, coming to you on April 12th of 2022. We got a ton of news of extensions, a quick trade before opening day, and then our overall thoughts on some of the opening day weekend and some of the performances that we want to talk about for players doing good and players struggling so far, and just what we've thought about the overall start of the 2022 season. But before we get to all of that, how are you doing, Matt?
Doing great. Baseball's back, so how could it not be? But yeah, I mean, it's been a fun week. Baseball coming back, opening day. The weekend. As a Braves fan, the festivities of the the ring ceremony and the championship celebration from last year has been really cool to watch. And also, I went to the beach this weekend, so I can't complain about that either. So it's been a pretty fun weekend, and I'm excited. Baseball's back. I've got the Braves game on in the background here. If I seem distracted at some point, I know you've had the Dodgers game on, so you might get distracted at some point. But that's what it's all about. So they're definitely having a good week so far.
Yeah, I'm going to hereby, since I've been watching this 3 2/3 ending of the Dodger game so far, I want to hereby change my Cy Young pick from Sandy Alcantara to Andrew Heaney. Because, yeah. But, yeah, baseball's back. It's been really fun to the opening weekend. I don't think it's disappointed in any way. Even if your team has been losing the way that the game has been played this weekend. Some of these debuts we'll talk about later on. It's been refreshing. With everything that, could have lost a season, could have lost games, and the whole lockout being for 99 days. It's really refreshing to have baseball back. But let's go ahead and jump right into the news, and we'll talk about kind of the weekend and everything later on. But we'll go ahead and start with actually a trade that happened on opening day, and that was the Minnesota Twins acquiring Chris Paddack and Emilio Pagan for closer Taylor Rogers and Brent Rooker.
Yeah. So here's a deal where both of these teams really needed some help at the big league level. The Padres have had some injuries in that pitching staff. Yet again, they've been but the bullpen's really their issue. And you look at the Twins. I mean, they badly need starting pitching. And so the Twins got a guy who a lot of people still think had some upside, but was really struggling in San Diego, needed a change of scenery. Chris Paddack really hasn't been all that bad. Last year he had a 5 ERA, but his peripheral stats looked pretty good. 378 FIP, 387 xFIP. These numbers are really solid. Not top of the rotation numbers like a lot of people once thought Paddack might end up being that guy. But they're pretty good, and they're definitely he's definitely somebody who's going to get his chance starting in Minnesota and really have a long leash there too. Look at Emilio Pagan, a guy who he is a hard thrower, reliever. They really needed somebody who could pitch, if they're going to trade Rogers. And Emilio Pagan struggled last year in San Diego, but, the plate discipline numbers against them were still pretty solid. He just really struggled getting the ball on the ground, gave up a lot of home runs. This is a guy who, in 2019 with Tampa Bay, put up a 2.31 ERA and was one of the best relievers in baseball. So, he's not that far removed from that performance, and he really struggled mainly just in San Diego. So, the Twins got a couple nice pieces there. I definitely think the jury's out on both of them, but they're two pieces that are things that they need. The Padres really needed somebody who could close in the back end. And Taylor Rogers is going to be that guy. I mean, he's been a closer for a while. Last year, he was incredible in Minnesota. He had a 2.13 fielding independent pitching, a 3.35 ERA. It's not the best for a closer, but the defense in Minnesota last year was not very good, especially when Buxton was not playing. And but his peripheral stats and everything were great. You look at him; he's been really, really, really consistent. In fact, the last 4 years, he's been under a 3 FIP, which is really incredible. Makes him one of the better relievers in baseball. His expected ERA number last year was a 253, which that does take into account some defense there. So a little bit of bad luck for him. And this is a guy that the Padres desperately needed. And then Brent Rooker's a guy who he does have some upside. I remember him very well from when he was in college at Mississippi State. But he's really struggled with the strikeout bug in the minor leagues. He's a guy who's got a lot of power, and he's kind of one of those guys who maybe you hope it could be a late bloomer. And the Padres get a pretty high upside, close to the big league player that they can throw out in the throw out the outfield and see if they can maybe work on his game a little bit, get him going in AAA. So definitely a trade that I think works great for both sides.
Yeah, it really does work well for both sides. It seemed like it was probably time for Taylor Rogers to kind of move away from Minnesota after the past 2 to 3 years. They've had a lot of rumors about him potentially being traded. Paddock needed a fresh start. It had really soured in San Diego. You could just tell he was unhappy, and his performance on the field kind of brought that with it. And it makes sense for Minnesota. You get a guy who is, barely getting ready to go into arbitration this year. He's a free agent in entering the 2025 season. So you have, 3+ years of control with him. Pagan is a guy who is he's also a free agent in 2024. So you get a couple years of control of him, whereas in Rogers was going to be a free agent, I believe, going into 2023, I think after this year. So you basically get two pieces that will be part of your team for multiple years going forward for a outfielder that you weren't going to play every day. And San Diego's hoping that he's a lottery ticket, and a closer who is probably better than the one you got, but you have more control. And a guy who probably was not going to be there after this year anyways. So it does work well for both sides. Maybe the Twins are able to, harness what Paddock had struggled with in San Diego, get him back to a fastball changeup and help that breaking ball a little bit more, because I think that's what he's really struggled with. And San Diego, they get a lockdown closer down at the back end because they lost Mark Melanson in the offseason, and maybe they hit gold with Rooker. I think they did option him, so he's in the minors right now, but maybe they figure something out with him because they do need an outfielder. But let's go ahead and jump over. We had a laundry list of extensions happen right before opening day as well. And we'll start with the Guardians, who brought us 3 of those, extending Emmanuel Clase for 5 years for $20 million, Miles Straw 5 years for $25 million, and then the big one, which is Jose Ramirez of 5 years at $124 million.
Yeah, let me preface this by saying that I don't think I gave the Guardians enough credit before the season. This team could be sneaky good. Some of the pieces that they have, but first off, starting with Clase, this guy throws 100-mile-an-hour cutters, and he has control of them to a certain level. So, I mean, you can't say no to that. I mean, last year, a 1.29 ERA in 69 innings, nice. 24 saves. He was really, 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 really good last year. Um, just incredible. His peripherals backed it up. And coming up, with Texas, he was part of the Corey Kluber trade. Always showed it off in the minor leagues. Definitely for sure reliever type guy, but reliever only. But great on them to extend him, get him through those ARB years. They also got club options for 2027, 2028. So, this is a guy who's going to be there for an awful long time as the Guardians closer. Moving on, looking at the next guy on our list here, Miles Straw. He had a fantastic year last year. I didn't even realize it. He played 158 games, put up almost 4 wins above replacement. Played a great defense in center field. Put up a league average offensive season too. He does not have power to speak of, but he's got speed and he gets on base. He had a 10% walk rate last year, which was really solid for a guy who doesn't have a lot of power. And he kept the strikeouts under 20%. That's with Houston and Cleveland. So this is a guy who, Cleveland's really struggled in the outfield for a while, and this is a guy who could man center field out there. He reminds me a little bit of an Ender Inciarte type guy who was really solid for the Braves for 3 or 4 years. So this deal could end up being pretty good, just $5 million a year. for the next through 2026, and he also has club options. And then the big one's Jose Ramirez. And there's not too much to say about this guy other than that he's a perennial MVP candidate. Spectacular plate discipline numbers. He's got great power. Hit 36 home runs last year. Put up 6 wins above replacement last year. Um, it's one of these days he's going to end up winning that MVP. So, you're getting him on a pretty dang cheap deal. That really, and you got him locked up through 2028. He's 29 years old. He'll only be, he'll be 35 when at the end of this deal. So he might be on the downswing at that point, but he still won't be like won't be like you're paying him $20 million at 40 years old. So I think this is a fantastic. All 3 of these deals are great for Cleveland. And then, you kind of add these 3 pieces. This is your core, part of your core. You add Bieber to that. You add some of those young pitchers they have in the starting rotation. One of those short guys they got from the Mets, both of them have been pretty good. For them, Ahmed Rosario had a pretty good season last year. He hadn't been talked about too much, but you can maybe end up having one of those guys man, shortstop, and you got a pretty good core there. So, solid look for the Guardians, and we'll see what they look like going forward. But these 3 pieces are going to be a key to it.
Yeah, they really will be. You mentioned Jose Ramirez is probably, for a long time, was one of the most underrated players in baseball. I think the past couple years he's finally started getting his due of people realizing how good he really is. And you mentioned if one of these years happens that he wins the MVP, it won't be the most shocking thing in the world. Like, he's had some really great seasons. You look at 2016, 2017, where he hit 318 to 374 on base, 583 slugging, a 146 WRC plus. Then 2018 he had a 147 WRC plus as well. The batting average went down, but the on base went up. And had 39 homers that year. A guy who can still stole 27 bases last year as well. Plays pretty good defense over there at third. Maybe later on gets shifted over to maybe second base or something, but he's a top level player, and it's good that he finally got the money that he deserved in that, because he wanted to stay in Cleveland. There had been the rumors a lot that he was going to get traded the past couple years, and he had always said that he wanted to stay there. Seems like he took less money to stay there. He could have got way more money on the open market. So good for him and good for the team. Clase is a guy who, if you have him for 5 at 20, that's probably a steal. Even though he's going through his ARB years, like when he gets to ARB, he'd probably be making more than that, within 2 years. Anyways,
Tag on those club options too. I mean, that's
right. Yeah. So, and then Straw, like you mentioned, he's going to be a serviceable outfielder, and at $5 million a year, like, that's nothing. If he ends up being a bench bat for you, a defensive replacement, speed guy that can start every once in a while, come in, get on base, hit solidly, like, that's a very good deal. But like you mentioned, once he went to Cleveland last year, a 285 batting average of 362 on base, like, sure, he doesn't slug, he doesn't hit homers, but those first 2 numbers with the speed he has, the way he can impact a game on the bases and play really good defense, like, you would take that any day of the week. So, and when he got there, he was a 108 WRC plus, so he's above league average. So very good deals from Cleveland all around. Kind of helps make up for that they haven't signed anybody in free agency this past year, but we'll talk a little bit more about Cleveland here and some of the other pieces that they've had show off this weekend. But let's jump over. We'll be quick on this one, but the Houston Astros extend closer Ryan Pressley 2 years for $30 million.
Yeah, Ryan Pressley is one of the best relievers in baseball, and he never gets talked about as being one of those. I mean, the guy is incredible. Last year, he put up 2.4 wins above replacement as a reliever, 2.06 FIP, 2.25 ERA in 64 innings. Just incredible. Doesn't walk guys, strikes out a lot of guys. I mean, last 4 years, he's been one of the best relievers in the game. So there's not too much else you can say about Ryan Pressley. I mean, I know 2 years, 30, that, $15 million is a little bit pricey of a reliever, but I mean, for him, he'd probably get more than that on the open market, and you're locking him up, buying out a couple free agent years. So Ryan Pressley, man, he's really, really, really solid. So, um, but he's the key to the Houston bullpen.
Yeah, he is. He's a guy who will lock down the back end of that bullpen for you. It's not really much outside of market value. You look, Kenley, just got 16 million for a back end closer. I think Kimbrel's making 16 million as well. So like, it's not that out of the price range for what a pretty good closer is in today's game.
Yeah,
So,
and Presley's better than both of those guys too. I mean, in my opinion,
all right, well,
I think
let's move
right
on.
now he is. He is now.
Maybe,
3 or 4 years ago, no, but he is now.
maybe we'll see. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one, though, and that's Brian Hayes signs an 8-year, $70 million extension with the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah, and this is another one. The Pirates are a team that obviously is a lot's been talked about their payroll and how they don't like to spend. And Brian Hayes is a guy who's homegrown, and they're getting in on him early on getting him locked up before he really breaks out to where he's going to get that. He's going to be worth way, way, way more than that. And this is a guy who, if he's able to get healthy and stay healthy, he will be worth more than the 8-year, $70 million he signed. This is a guy who, in 2020, in his first 95 career plate appearances, put up 1.6 WAR. I mean, incredible. And last year played 96 games, dealt with some injuries. The injuries really zapped his power. Was the biggest thing with him. He's a guy who, as a prospect, was kind of graded out as being somebody who would have league average-ish power. But last year, a 373 slugging percentage was really poor. But the plate discipline numbers looked pretty good in line with career averages. The strikeout's a little bit high compared to his minor league numbers, but you would expect as he gets seasoning in the big leagues for that to come down a little bit. This is a guy who it feels like he's been in the big leagues for a while now, but really he hadn't even put up a full season yet. So, and he's been really, really good in the amount of time he's been in the big leagues. So he's already put up over 3 WAR, and that's in less than that's in like what 100 exactly 120 games. So a guy who's capable of winning multiple Gold Gloves defensively at third base. If he's able to stay healthy, and then he will be a league average to above league average hitter who puts up Gold Glove defense. He'll be worth 3 or 4 wins above replacement every year, and this is an absolute steal of a contract if he's able to do that. So, definitely like Brian Hayes, and I think Pittsburgh got a great deal, and he'll add to that core with when O'Neal Cruz comes up and some of the guys they've drafted over the last couple of years with those high draft picks they've had. He's definitely one of them, and he's a great player. So
Yeah, my initial reaction was when he signed this deal or when it got broke. I literally put in our group chat, I was like, Brian, no. Like, man, you could have got so much more money. But, it helps him get a little bit more financial stability now, sacrifices a little bit later on. But guy commits to Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh commits to him, which is something they haven't done recently. I think this was their second biggest deal in franchise history, I believe,
might have been
or
their
is it the
largest.
biggest?
I think it was their largest. And the last time, or the thing is their largest, and their previous before that, their largest was Jason Kendall.
Well, I didn't know if McCutchen had signed
here.
a bigger deal with them or not.
I don't think so.
I'll have to look into that. Maybe I'll bring that up maybe next week or something. But you mentioned his 2020 season where he had in 95, in the 24 games or whatever, he had the 1.6 WAR. If you look at 2021, he had 96 games and he put up a 1.5 WAR. So that just tells you how much the injuries zapped a lot of, like you said, his power, but also just his overall ability last year. So if he is able to get healthy, if that power comes back, which we all expect it to, once he gets the seasoning, like he's going to be a very good player. And that Gold Glove defense, it's a really good deal for the Pirates. Right now, it's a good deal for Cabrian. Eventually, it might look like a bad deal, but hey, you can never fault the young guy for wanting to sign a long-term thing that will guarantee him more money than he can imagine right now. Yeah. Now they just need to do the same thing with Brian Reynolds. Like they need to commit to Brian Reynolds and then help develop your other guys. Once you get, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's gonna be a lot more difficult to sign Brian Reynolds to a good deal because he's a lot closer to free agency and
I
he's
you don't even you
more
just have to
established at the
sign
big
him.
league level. Well,
Just you don't even have to sign him to like a good deal for you. Just sign him. Commit long term to Brian Reynolds. Like say,
yeah,
look, Brian Reynolds, got Brian Hayes. We're gonna get O'Neal Cruz. We're gonna have Henry Davis coming up in a year or two. Like, hey, this will be our core moving forward. Instead, like you sign Brian Hayes, and if you trade Brian Reynolds, what does that really do for you? It just pushes the can farther down the road. So you know, I'm happy that Cabrian got paid. I think he could have got more, but I want to see Pittsburgh do more of this. Like start committing more to it, to that core, and build the rest of the way up. Because if you just sign Cabrian and then you don't do anything else around him, like it's just going to be worthless. So hopefully they commit to that long term. But uh, we'll move on to the next one. That's J.P. Crawford signing a 4-year, $46 million extension with the Seattle Mariners.
yeah. So J.P. Crawford's a guy who is he's very very he's got some good stuff. He's a good shortstop defensively. Um, put up about 8 point he put up about an 8.1 defensive value last year. Um, and he put up 3 wins above replacement last year. Really solid player. Um, plate discipline numbers have been his big thing. He's been a great defensive player, and he's also been able to get on base. That's a good combination. Doesn't hit the ball especially hard. Doesn't slug. He's never hit more than 9 home runs in a season. Never been in double digits, but gets on base. Not a super fast guy, but I mean, you can always throw a guy like this at the bottom of your order, get on base, keep the line moving. He was actually an above average hitter last year at a 103 WRC plus. So you look at him as a guy who, and maybe as he continues to work at it, he develops a little bit more power. As a prospect, he was graded as having a 50 raw power, so maybe he works on that and gets a little bit better in that facet. But this is a guy who you're signing him to a deal of 4 years, 46 million, a little over 10 million a year. Not too bad there. Solid shortstop, and if you can keep putting up 2 to 3 WAR every year, then it's a good deal. So.
Yeah, it's a pretty good deal for both sides there. And I don't even think that he plays great defense, but there all is some concerns about maybe his long term fit at shortstop. So this deal also still allows you to shift him over to second base eventually if you want to, if you find a better long term fit into the shortstop. Like if you go into the market this year and you're in on Correa or you're in on a Trey Turner, this deal's not going to stop it. But Crawford is still a really good player. A guy who has really found himself the past couple years in Seattle. Really in the 2020 seasons when you started seeing the first flashes of it, got on base a little bit more. Um, and the plate discipline numbers, the strikeout rate went really, way down from 21% down to about 17. He dropped that to 16.6 last year, had a better average. On base stayed about the same. And with the defense, he plays, it's going to be a really good deal overall. So good for JP Crawford, and good for Seattle, committing to a guy that you can, or has been a piece that you've built with for the past couple of years. But let's go on to the next one we had, and that's Garrett Whitlock, signing a 4-year, 18.75 million extension with Boston.
Yeah, this one was interesting. Garrett Whitlock is this is going to be an arb avoidance contract. I don't think it bought out a free agent year actually. But he's a good pitcher. In the minor leagues he was pretty solid. Got traded actually from New York to Boston, which is interesting. In 2021 with Boston, put up a great season. 9 or almost 10 strikeouts per 9, just 2 walks per 9. Gets the ball on the ground a lot. That led to a 196 ERA over 73 innings as a reliever. I think a lot of Boston people think he might be able to be a starter if they need him to. So that's another interesting thing. Some of the projection systems haven't projected for over 100 innings. So definitely a guy who could go multiple innings if you need him to. There's a lot of value in that. This is not a real risky deal. I mean, and you're really just buying out RBers, but um, pretty solid guy here to get for Boston. So to lock up for the next 4 years, he'll be a solid piece in that bullpen. It's like a swing man. So
Yeah, and just to your point, he was almost a starter this year. Like he was in the battle for that fifth
Yeah.
rotation spot, and they ended up or fourth and fifth, and they ended up going with Tanner Houck and Rich Hill to begin with. But just today, he pitched 4 innings, I believe, against Detroit. Didn't allow a run, 2 strikeouts. So he's a guy who I wouldn't be surprised to be in the rotation. By the back half of the year, even. And going forward, he's definitely a guy who can be either. He can be one of those late inning high leverage guys, or he could be a middle to back end of the rotation guy for you. So, like you said, it did do ARB years. There is a couple club options for 2027 and 2028. So I think that might
It
get
might have.
into a year or
I think it
two.
might have bought 1 year free agency out with
Yeah,
that.
I think it's either 1 or 2 years
You're
with
right.
that. But yeah, because he's arbitration eligible in 24, so 3 years. So yeah, they bought an extra year with the 2028 option. So really solid deal. It's not too big money, and if he ends up being in a rotation to the middle and the back half and keep the production he has had, then it's going to look like a steal. But let's go to an extension that wasn't signed, and that was Aaron Judge rejecting a 7-year, $213.5 million extension from the Yankees, and has said that there will not be extension talks during the year, and that he will be a free agent at the end of the season.
Yeah, this is a big deal. Aaron Judge last year, I think it was the most impressive season of his career in the way that he cut his strikeout rate a lot. I mean, down from, he'd been around 30% his entire career. He cut it down to 25% while keeping a walk rate and keeping the power going. And the biggest deal, staying healthy. This is a guy who in 2017 played in 155 games. That was his big breakout year where he hit 52 home runs, put up 8 WAR. And since then, his maximum amount of games he's played was 112 until last year. And last year, put up 5 wins above replacement. Plays a really good defense in right field, um, and it just hits the. I mean, obviously, his size just absolutely knocks the cover off the baseball. And he's a guy who is going to be a stalwart for any team for a long time if he can stay healthy, which has been his issue. That's, I think, where the question marks about what can you sign him to come in. He wants to prove this season that he can stay healthy again, put up another season like last year, or maybe even better than last year. Um, and if he does that, then you're looking at a guy who has put back-to-back healthy seasons together. You're looking at a guy who wants something in the range of what Mookie Betts got as a top right fielder a couple years ago. Then you kind of look at the Yankees standpoint. They don't want to give him that because this is a guy who's been injured for like 3 years in a row. Last year he didn't play. He did miss 14 games last year too. Still, even though he did put up close to a full season. Um, you know, he's a guy who you do worry about his health. And this year, if he's able to stay healthy, then he's going to get a huge deal in the offseason. I think that's what he's waiting to see. He's still going to get a big contract regardless whether he's healthy or not this year. But I think that's probably where the hangup was. And, uh, Aaron Judge will be probably the top piece on the market, depending on what Correa does. Maybe depending on Trey Turner, how he does this year. But I mean, Judge will be right up there along with them. So, big time bat going to hit the market this offseason, and that's a big deal and exciting for a lot of teams, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's exciting for a lot of teams. I think that this was more of a like, hey, the Yankees, will you take a hometown discount to say, you've said you wanted to be a Yankee the entire career and you don't want to play anywhere else. Will you take a discount to do that? And I just don't think he was willing to. Like, he should be right around the range of what Anthony Rendon got, which was 7 for 245. Going into his age 30 season, and that's what Judge is going to be going to the market at, is his age 30 season.
31.
What does he turn?
He's 30 right now.
He's 29. He turns 30 next month.
Yeah.
So technically, but it's still going to be right around that. Like, I think a 7-year 245 when they were offering 7 at 213, like, it's a little bit short, and I can understand why. They wanted to play it. Well, here's the 8th year. Well, 8th year was just including this season, so it was basically 7 more years on the end of it. And I think that he just wanted it what was a fair market value for him to stay there. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out going into the into the offseason, into free agency this next year. We'll talk a lot about it at that point, but it would go a long way if he's able to stay healthy and have even a season like he had last year. Because if he does that, I believe he will easily hit the Rendon number and even over that. So it'll be interesting to watch. But that's basically we'll wrap up the extension parts. The next thing we're going to go to is another youngster getting his call up to the big leagues, and that's Nick Lodolo from the Cincinnati Reds is getting called up and actually will have his major league debut tomorrow.
Yeah, Nick Lodolo's an interesting prospect. He's kind of a sinker slider type of guy. The slider is really, really good, but he also commands the baseball really well, which is nice. Last year, 2021, put up 10 starts in Double A, 44 innings, 13.9 strikeouts per nine, 1.84 walks per nine. Uh, just a guy who doesn't walk guys, able to get those strikeouts in the minor leagues. We'll see if that continues at the big league level. Doesn't throw especially hard, but I think he'll be a solid piece. He's pretty well rounded, got a pretty high floor. I think he'll be a solid piece in the Cincinnati rotation going forward. They've had some, they pair along with Hunter Greene, who obviously is a rookie this year, and then also Tyler Mahle and Luis Castillo still there. Pretty solid rotation there out of those four. If Greene and Lodolo are able to, be really good at the big league level. In fact, it's interesting. Lodolo is kind of the opposite of Hunter Greene. Hunter Greene's this guy with wild stuff, loses his command a little bit at times. He throws 101 miles an hour, and then Lodolo is this guy who is really pinpoint. Probably got a high floor, gets the ball on the ground a lot. Does get the strikeouts in the minor leagues, but of course, you're looking at a really small sample size with him in the minor leagues. So projection system seemed to like him. I think it's a pretty good call up for the Reds. Get him a cup of coffee and see what he looks like at the big league level.
Yeah, it's about time as well. Like if you're calling Hunter Greene up and you're kind of going to this phase where you're wanting to see what you have for the future, bringing Lodolo at age 24 up, you're going to have to call him up this year basically anyways, because he's Rule 5 eligible this offseason. So you're going to see what he has and moving forward. So really good by the Reds to call up Lodolo, and we'll see what he has tomorrow in his first start. But we'll jump over to another starting pitcher, and this one's with Lucas Giolito, who had to leave his start, I think, after 4 innings with an abdominal strain, and is now announced that he'll miss at least his next 2 starts. Then as well, the White Sox have placed A.J. Pollock on the IL with a hamstring strain.
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal for the White Sox. Giolito, obviously, their ace. You never want to see him get injured, even if it's a pretty minor deal. He looked pretty good in his first start. Not great. Did walk a couple guys in his 4 innings, but wasn't bad. Didn't give up a run. Only pitched 4 innings, like I said. But when you're, the thing that really hurts with this is that. We'll talk about in a little bit how the pitching is working right now in the big leagues. All these guys are still kind of ramping up because of the short spring training, and it really stinks for Giolito to have ramped up a little bit, gotten his pitch counts going, gotten going a little bit, and now he has kind of reset. And I'm assuming that'll probably set him back to where he'll have to regain his arm again, get stretched back out, and so this might be a little bit lengthier than a typical abdominal strain that would maybe happen mid-season in a normal year. But that hurts. AJ Pollock obviously got traded there just a couple weeks ago. He had been he had been starting for them in the outfield. Been off to a pretty good start. He only played 2 games, but I mean, he hit a home run, or he didn't hit a home run, but he's hit 571 in his first 2 games. So it's four out of 4 hits and in 7 plate appearances. So um, he had been looking pretty good to the start of the season, and losing him to a hamstring strain, you worry about his health. He hasn't ever stayed healthy. So ever since 2015 with the Diamondbacks, this last season he played more than 117 games. So we'll see what happens with AJ Pollock going forward. But I'm not sure what the timeline on his injury is. So
Yeah, it didn't seem like it was going to be too long from his posts, at least.
I'm saying I'm saying 10 to 11 days is possible. So on the injured list, so it's not
Yeah,
bad.
the hamstring's something that he's dealt with the past couple years. With him being in LA, it's been something they've managed. Sometimes he's even played through a slight strain, anyways. So we'll see how he moves forward with that. But the hamstring is something that has been reoccurring the past couple years. Does really suck for Giolito, especially, and the White Sox. After losing Lance Lynn, he went down for knee surgery as well, which we mentioned a couple episodes ago. So also losing Giolito at the top of that rotation, that hurts. It's your 1 and 2 guys. You lost Rendon or Carlos Rodon in the offseason. So there has been some slight rumors that they were in the market for a Frankie Montas trade and that might be happening, but nothing as concrete has come out. So that's something we'll keep an eye on. But hopefully Giolito can get back pretty soon because he's pretty fun to watch. But another starter that hit the IL was Taijuan Walker. Went to the IL with shoulder bursitis.
Yeah, I mean, you don't like seeing injury this early in the season. Obviously, Taijuan Walker, he only pitched 2 innings in his first outing. They pulled him out because of the injury. And it sounds like he's not going to miss a super long amount of time, but those shoulder injuries can be a little tricky for pitchers. They're saying they think he'll probably need a rehab start before he comes up, so I would assume they probably miss him one time in the rotation, then he'll get a rehab start, and then so I'm assuming it'll probably be about 2 weeks before he's could potentially return to the Mets. Of course, as a back end of the rotation guy, I don't think it's the biggest deal for the Mets if he misses a start, but they already do have the injury to DeGrom, and Scherzer has dealt with some nagging stuff right before the season started, so just kind of bunch of issues so far, um, for them. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, hopefully for the Mets, he'll come back pretty soon. So
Yeah, and another one which we didn't have marked down, but I just remembered it was Blake Snell got scratched like 5 minutes before he was supposed to, pitch for the Padres against the Diamondbacks this weekend with left adductor tightness. It's actually what ended his season last year. Initial plans were for him to go on the IL, but he was going to throw again today, and not quite sure that he's going to go on the IL now. Just might be pushed back a couple more days. So that'll be something that we'll have to get more information on going into next week's episode. But so for the back half of this episode, or the back little portion of it, we kind of just wanted to go over the overall thoughts on the weekend, what we had, and then mention some of those younger players that or players, debuts with new teams or whatever that we felt were good stories for the first weekend. And I know our first one we wanted to start with was the debut of Seiya Suzuki with the Chicago Cubs.
Yeah, so it was interesting. You know, Seiya Suzuki's been really good so far for the Cubs. He actually hit 2 home runs today, um, which was pretty crazy. He's definitely a guy. He looks a lot better than he did in spring training. Still is striking out a lot, which is a little bit worrisome. But the power has been there so far. He's taken some tough pitches. He's walked a pretty good bit, which is good. Um, and it'll be interesting to see how as the season continues how he if he's able to continue. I mean, he's obviously not going to continue hitting 417 with a 529 on base, but if he's able to put up a pretty good stat line and be that middle of the order bat that the Cubs were hoping they signed from Japan. So but a fantastic start for him, a guy who really did not look good in spring training, comes out in the regular season and looked really, really good in his first 4 or 5 games in the big leagues. So really, really solid start for him. And, we'll see if he can continue it.
Yeah, it's been really fun to watch him. He's one of the reasons, him and Nick Madrigal, for selfish reasons, for fantasy purposes, but they've been real reasons why I've tried to turn on the Cubs game and watch them over the weekend and stuff. And Suzuki's at-bats were really good. Even the at-bats where he was striking out, I think outside of one of them, it was like a 3-2 count, and it was just he just got fooled on the pitch, which can easily happen, especially with he was facing the Brewers rotation of Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff, and Freddie Peralta, who we know are very known for striking lots of people out. But the overall weekend is good good plate appearances, deep at bats. The eye was really really good. He wasn't taking swinging at pitches way out of the zone, which is really good to see. It's something from an import bat that, like you said, struggled in spring training a little bit. It's really good to see that he wasn't just fooled by the velocity and just trying to swing because he felt he had to. So it's really been really good to see. Going on to another outfielder that we've basically had, Stephen Kwan has been basically Mike Trout reincarnated.
Yeah, Stephen Kwan is a guy that a lot of people had kind of been picking him as a potential rookie of the year candidate, as dark horse, even with all the talent coming up in the American League. Um, made his spot on the big league club, and his calling card has been in the minor leagues a guy that never strikes out, and he doesn't have a lot of power. His career high in home runs is 7 in the minor leagues. Or last year he hit 12 but across 2 levels. So maybe not quite Nick Madrigal level low power, but sprays the ball around and can play some defense in the outfield. And has some speed. And a solid all around looking player, and he has started off extremely hot at the plate. He still has not struck out in his first 24 plate appearances. Um, one of the special things about him is that he walks a lot for a guy who doesn't strike out. A lot of these guys who never strike out, they're not striking out because they're swinging early in the count and making weak contact a lot. And Quan seems like a guy who is just got a really good eye and good hand-eye coordination, doesn't strike out a lot. So, he's already put up .7 WAR, put up a 700 batting average, almost 667, with 750 on base, 933 slugging, a 338 WRC plus of the season so far. Obviously, those numbers aren't going to continue like that, but definitely a guy who looks like he's going to be a really solid piece for Cleveland. And how about their outfield in Cleveland? I mean, you talk about Miles Straw and Stephen Kwan. They actually finally have some guys out there who aren't, really, really a problem. So that's pretty, that's pretty cool. So, it's interesting how that worked. But definitely, definitely Cleveland is or Stephen Kwan's a guy to look out for going forward. Has had the best debut of any rookie so far, and that's pretty wild. So
Yeah, you mentioned their outfield. They're also having Ahmed Rosario play some left field now, so
yeah,
that's been pretty interesting to watch. But I'll take your Stephen Kwan not striking out so far this season, and I'll even raise it a little bit more because I don't know. I doubt you probably know this because I just heard about it today, and I had to fact check it myself. Through 4 games, Stephen Kwan has not swung and missed.
wow. I don't know.
Every
Did
time,
did
every
he
time
swing
he
and miss today?
swung, no, he did not swing and miss today even. The one that he did swing and they thought he missed was actually it was a foul tip. It
Oh,
grazed
okay.
it. And then there was a called strike, I think, on the second pitch of it. But yeah, through 4 games, he hasn't swung and missed so far, which is insane to me at least.
Yeah.
So yeah, not striking out, but not even swinging and missing through 4 games. So little Stephen Kwan fact that I thought was pretty interesting. But we'll kind of keep with Kwan and who they were playing. They were playing the Kansas City Royals this weekend, and Bobby Witt talk about having a good debut in his first game. Hits an RBI double late in the game to bring in the go-ahead run. And then I think it was on Saturday, had like an amazing diving stop at third, threw it home when the runner was coming from third to nail him, stopped that run from scoring, and that would have been, I think, the game tying run. And basically, I think an out later, the Royals go on to win the game. So he's had an impact on the offensive side with an RBI double and a big defensive play at third base to help seal the win as well.
Yeah, Bobby Witt's a guy who obviously talked about as possibly the top prospect in the minors over the last couple of years. I think MLB Pipeline had him number 1. He's very very good. He hasn't really had a great debut so far, over the weekend at the plate. But man, that play he made was insane, and you could just see the athletic talent from that, the creativity, the fielding ability. Um, that was just an insane play. But Bobby Witt has struggled at the plate so far. Um, striking out a pretty good bit. He has been a little bit unlucky at 154 BABIP. It's pretty low, but and then, of course it's only 4 games, so it's not that big of a deal. But obviously, but yeah, I mean, it's been a been a little bit of a rocky start for a lot of these guys. We'll talk about a couple more in a minute, but Bobby Witt with the flashy plays got a lot of attention this weekend, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah, so another really hyped prospect that a lot of people were looking forward to as well was Hunter Greene. He made his debut this weekend against Atlanta, went 5 innings, gave up 3 earned runs, 2 of those being homers, 2 walks, but 7 strikeouts.
Yeah, Hunter Greene did exactly. He was exactly the guy we thought we were getting out of the minor leagues. Guy who his stuff is dazzling, has that really really good velocity on fastball, and the slider is just an unbelievably good pitch. I think he is working on a changeup a little bit, but the big problem with him is that the 2 problems he's had were command, being consistent with it. He had a couple walks in that 5 innings, and then the fastball flattening out a little bit. And when the fastball flattened out, Matt Olson and Travis d'Arnaud greeted him. So, you know, he's a guy that this is probably what he's going to be this year. He's probably going to be a little bit inefficient. He's probably going to walk a few guys. He's going to give up some home runs because that fastball shape isn't perfect. But at the same time, his stuff is so good, he's going to strike a lot of guys out, and he's going to be a solid mid-rotation arm this year. I think the thing that excites you about Hunter Greene is the future. He's going to continue to work on that command. I'm sure that they will work with him on that fastball, getting the shape better on it, where he can maybe give up a few less home runs, get a little less hard contact, because for a guy who throws so hard, he does get squared up a little bit. But he's going to strike out a lot of guys. He's going to walk a decent amount of guys, not a ton. It's not one of these minor leaguers that comes up and just cannot find the zone. But he's going to dazzle. He's going to have some highlight pitches. I'm sure Pitching Ninja will show him an awful lot. And he's gonna, the biggest thing too, hopefully he stays healthy. He's had some issues with injuries up until last year, and you got to remember he's only put up about 100 innings above A-ball in his minor league career. So, we'll see what happens with him, and hopefully, Hunter Greene will, continue to work on his craft and improve and become that ace that everyone expected him to be when he was drafted. So.
Yeah, from the little bit I watched, the stuff was amazing, and I think that's just what everyone knows about Hunter Greene. But like you said, it is going to be interesting to see how he's able to develop throughout the year, and how many innings they let him get to, because he hasn't been able to pitch that many innings in full seasons. So it's going to be interesting to see that. But another rookie starting pitcher actually pitched today that had a pretty good game was Matt Brash.
Yeah, Matt Brash is a guy that he's an interesting prospect. It was cool to see him make their rotation out of the spring. A guy who gets a lot of strikeouts, has a good fastball, wipeout slider, great curveball, struggles with the command a little bit. But he's a guy that you look out for Seattle. He's never pitched above Double-A. He's only pitched in he really hasn't pitched all that much in the minor leagues in general. Just barely over 100 innings in the minor leagues. So, there's not a huge amount of track record to go off of from him. But obviously, the Mariners felt good about calling him up and bringing him in out of spring training, and starting for them right off the bat. And today, he's pretty good. Had a solid debut, 5 1/3 innings, 6 strikeouts, 1 walk, 2 earned runs. Nothing you can complain about there. Seattle didn't exactly help him out with the bats, but a solid debut for him. If he can put up that line, every game this year, they would be very, very happy with that. So.
Yeah, and he actually even, I think it was right in that the 6 innings where he gave up that solo home run to Luis Robert at the time to put them ahead. So he ended up getting the loss from that one. But throughout the game, he looked really good. Some of those knuckle curves, the movement on him was disgusting. His changeup looked nasty, just dropping like 6-8 inches, vertically or downward from his fastball. Like the stuff was pretty damn good. It was better than I had thought, watching him from spring training. Like today, this stuff really popped off the screen. So it'll be interesting to see what he's able to do going forward if he's able to keep the command and how major leaguers react to the stuff. Because now that they've seen it in a big league ballpark, teams have seen him, before they'll have a scouting report. So will be fun to watch. But a couple of the high level rookies that have struggled so far: Spencer Torkelson and Julio Rodriguez.
Yeah, both these guys seem like they're still adjusting to big league pitching. Julio Rodriguez and Torkelson both have struck out a ton, and to start the season. Both of these guys Torkelson's a guy who a lot of people were thinking was ready for the big leagues when he was drafted, but losing that year from COVID really didn't help in 2020. So, he put up fantastic numbers in the minor leagues, and we'll see what he ends up doing at the big league level. Did a little bit better today. Had his first hit, was a double, scored a run. He'll get going. Julio Rodriguez, same kind of deal. A lot of people expecting him to come out. He looked great in spring training, come out just on fire. And it's rare. It's rare that these guys, what Juan Soto did as a rookie, what Ronald Acuna Jr. did as a rookie, what Cody Bellinger did as a rookie, what Aaron Judge did as a rookie. It's really rare, and you see, there's a reason that those were considered special, and it happened so often, so quickly that you don't really think that you're kind of expecting it to happen every time. And with one of these prospects, but it takes an adjustment period for a lot of guys, and it looks like Julio Rodriguez and Torkelson both, and Bobby Witt, all three of those guys are going to need that adjustment period to a certain level. Um, the strikeouts have been piling up for all three of them, and they just need to adjust to that big league pitching. They know how to get guys out at the big league level. So,
Yeah, they're going to need time. It's easy to see that a lot of these prospects will come in and struggle. Usually, when guys succeed right away, you're saying that they just are on the lucky side of it, and that you get on a hot streak and you can see the ball pretty well, and then maybe you just came out of spring training with that. But it's not abnormal to see these young guys struggle. Now it'll be interesting to see how long they struggle for and what adjustments they're able to make and how that affects them, psychologically. That's the thing. A lot of these players are players who down in the minors haven't struggled before, and even in college haven't struggled, high school haven't struggled. So getting to the major leagues and struggling up there can be very humbling. And that's, I think, the hard part for a lot of these rookies. You hear them talk about is getting over that mental hurdle of like, hey, I'm trying to figure it out here. Um, there's gonna be times where I'm not very good, and how can I adjust to make myself better for that scenario? Um, if there's three guys that you would say looking through this and say who can figure it out, it's going to be Bobby Witt, Spencer Torkelson, and Julio Rodriguez. Like, the talent's there, they just got to get used to major league pitching. It's definitely a step. Like, you're facing top notch guys now, so no doubt in my mind that they'll figure it out. But just to wrap up the show, last little bit here, what were your overall thoughts on the weekend of baseball? From opening day through the weekend, what we've seen so far. What are your thoughts?
well, I mean, my biggest takeaway I've had is the starting pitching has been an issue for just about everybody. Um, you know, we had the shortened spring training, which really hasn't helped these guys get ramped up. A lot of guys getting pulled early, at under 80 pitches, haven't been able to go deep into games yet. Through spring training, they're still ramping up. A lot of guys on strict pitch counts. That kind of sucks. And then you got some guys who haven't reined it in yet. I mean, Brandon Woodruff, Corbin Burns, both of those guys looked really, really, really rough in you know, in in their first couple games in Chicago, with the Brewers, and then you look at a guy like Ian Anderson looked really poor. Julio Urias did not have a good game in his first start, and I mean the list goes on. There's a bunch of guys, and a lot of it's been walks and control issues. Sandy Alcantara walked 5 guys in his first start. He's a guy who is known for not walking many guys. I mean, it's something that's probably not going to continue very long. But we'll see what happens. I'm definitely hoping to see these guys kind of settle down as we get into the season. And but that's been a big takeaway. We've also had some other things too. We had a few cool debuts this weekend for new teams.
Yeah, so one of them was with the San Diego Padres and Sean Manaea, which I'll talk about that one in a second, but I want to talk about the opening day they had as well. Yu Darvish had a no-hitter through 6 innings, gets pulled in the seventh with the lead, and the Padres lose it like the first batter after he's pulled, end up losing the game on a walk-off home run by Seth Beer on National Beer Day, so that was pretty cool. With his family in the stands, which made it even cooler. And then the next day, the Padres come back, and Sean Manaea makes his debut with the Padres, and they go through 7 no-hit innings. And then as soon as he gets pulled, they give it up right right again. They do end up winning that game as well, but it was pretty interesting and kind of cool to see the back to back sixth and 7 innings with no hitters going. As we just talked about how starters are getting pulled earlier, and these guys were able to take these, be efficient and take these no hitters later on. Although it is the Diamondbacks, so I mean, there's it's not like you're going through the Dodgers or the Braves lineups, but it was still pretty impressive as a debut, especially for Sean Manaea.
Yeah, and a couple guys have had pretty good starts at the bats with their new teams as well. You look at Matt Olson has been the second most valuable player in baseball so far. Has absolutely hit the cover off the ball. Hit his first home run yesterday, or Sunday with the Braves, and his plate discipline's been really, really, really good. In fact, 600 on base to start the season, really solid. Um, Chris Bryant's had a pretty good debut. He's hitting with the Rockies. He's hitting over 350 so far on the season. There's been a lot of these guys that giving good first impressions with their new teams. So that's been something cool to see. And then the one other thing I wanted to mention was the drama with Alec Boehm and Philly yesterday. Um, it was a really weird situation. Alec Boehm, actually, we've talked about a lot the Phillies defense, and Boehm he just can't play third right now. I mean, I don't think he ever will be able to. It's been a couple years in the big leagues for him now. He came in not being able to play third very well. He hadn't really improved much. Made 3 throwing errors yesterday and was caught on camera mouthing that he hated Philly. So there was a little bit of drama with that. People asking him in the post game about it. He kind of owned up to it, said, "Yeah, I said it. I didn't really mean it. I was frustrated." Obviously, Phillies fans can be really tough, and I think this does kind of go on to show how, you know, new guys on new teams or guys in those types of markets can wear on some players. I mean, you look at guys that have gotten out of places like that, like Gary Sanchez, maybe bounces back. That might be the way New York's real similar to Philly with the way their fans are, and getting out of there could really help a guy like Sanchez. Alec Boehm, if he got traded, could be helped out somewhere else. So it takes a different type of person in those types of markets. But I thought that was really interesting. Look, and the Phillies actually did come back and win that game last night, which was the Mets kind of collapsed in that one. But definitely some interesting stuff and some interesting talk from that drama in Philly a little bit.
Yeah, it's one of the unfortunate scenarios of where you have and like you said, he admitted he said it, but then he also said, like, I understand where they're coming from. Like, this is Philly sports. Like, better is demanded, and I'm not good. Like, he it was very candid and honest, which is a lot of things you don't usually hear from a lot of players, especially a younger player like Bohm is. So it was refreshing to hear. I'm going to be really, really fascinated with how that works out through the season. Because like we've mentioned, that Philly defense is going to be really bad, and the fans understand, what they need to win. So it's going to be something to watch. You were talking about the debuts. A couple other people I wanted to mention was Mark Canha has been off to a really good start as well. 571, a 647 on base so far with the Mets. No homers, but just overall good play. And then another one, Jeremy Pena, has big shoes to fill as the replacement for Carlos Correa at shortstop for the Astros. Very good prospect. Has batted 375 with a 412 on base so far. The plate discipline numbers, although it is 4 games still, they don't look all that great. 30% strikeout rate almost, only 6% walk rate. But he's found a way to get the job done. Hit a homer, couple runs. So will be pretty interesting to see Pena going through the rest of the season now he's able to fill those shoes of Correa, because he's going to be compared to him a lot because they didn't re-sign Correa, and they basically just said, Pena, it's your job. So a couple other guys that I wanted to mention with good debuts so far. But like you said, the overall thoughts on baseball. The pitchers do seem to be struggling with obviously the shorter ramp up, not being able to extend out. But it also, in certain instances so far, it does seem like the players are still like behind, if that makes any sense. Like I've seen a lot of players so far get caught by velocity, and just look fooled at the plate. We've had a couple big breakout games, but we've not had any of the big outbursts throughout the league, and we really see that the scoring totals are down a lot more than what's been expected the past couple full seasons. 2020, it kind of is reminding me of the start of 2020, of this 2020 season, at least, where pitchers are struggling, but hitters are also behind. So which one's going to catch up first? I think the way the pitchers have been able to is because they're just throwing so many darts at the wall back to back to back to back that they're not relying on everything. So when these pitchers start getting past the 60, 70 pitch mark, when pitchers usually start struggling and they're not going to the bullpen as much, how's that going to affect it moving forward? But it's been really fun just to have the game back. There's been some great performances. There's been already a benches clearing thing with Milwaukee and the Cubs, and also in Washington with the Mets. A couple Mets got hit in the face. Pete Alonso got hit in the face, and then Francisco Lindor was squaring to bunt and got hit in the that new chin pad, or the C pad, whatever they're calling it now. He got hit there, and then Buck Showalter just like basically started going out to the mound at Steve Cishek. So it's been a pretty wild opening weekend. I'm excited. It gives us a lot to talk about. And I can't wait moving forward. I feel like this is going to be a really good season, and stories are going to be very fruitful and plenty.
Absolutely. I'm excited to see what everything looks like here soon. One other note: Albert Pujols hit his first home run back in St. Louis today, so that was pretty cool. Pretty cool moment for him. But we'll see what happens. Definitely exciting time of year, and these pitchers, and it'll get ramped up here in the next week or two, be able to go full games, or full workloads. Hitters will start getting their timing down a little bit better. Has been a slow start for a lot of guys, but we'll see what they'll get going soon, and we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I'm super excited to see what happens. Next week we'll be able to do our players of the week too. That's what we usually close with, but this week, obviously with 3 or 4 games being played, we'll just wait till next week for that.
Yeah, Albert Pujols needs 20 more homers this season after tonight's, so he can hit the 700 mark. But I'll leave it on that. But thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of the Bat Flip Podcast, and we'll catch you guys next week.